Google's got what, 8.5 billion searches happening a day. It's been there for 25 years. It's wired up our world to a certain extent, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But Ken, for all of us that don't understand neuroscience and psychology all that well, I mean, what it strikes me, I've been in technology for several decades, and sometimes things come out of the blue and take over, and sometimes it's an illusion in terms of how fast and how far things switch. So what's the counter to this narrative that Google search is dying from a neuroscience and a psychological perspective?
Yeah, they're discounting the fact that familiarity and habits are incredibly powerful in the brain. So there is a type of personality traits that are indicative of early adopters. And if you assume that that group of people as the majority average person, then you will be very much wrong. So the type of personality traits that are like to be adopters are people who are extroverted, people who are highly social people, and people who are high in openness to experience. So that's basically people who are creative, people who are open to new ideas. Not everyone's like that. And also people who are low in neuroticism, which is people who are low in negative emotions. So if some people have higher negative emotions like anxiety, fear, they are less likely to adopt new products and stick with what they know, right? So Google search is still highly popular and highly impactful still because a lot of people don't want to switch from Google search. All right, so that's the overall of it. But we can go deep into the the exact sort of neuronal patterns in the brain and why that's the case a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We did a trade show recently in Australia, and we had LLMs plastered on our wall, and a lot of people just did not, in the e-commerce industry, e-commerce managers weren't familiar with the term LLM. So I've dumbed it down a little to just, when we're talking about LLMs, we're just going to talk about ChatGPT, because everybody knows what ChatGPT is. Probably this audience is a lot more sophisticated, but I was talking to a client today, and I talked about ChatGPT and its 6 cousins, because I don't want to have to reel off every flavor of LLM. But essentially, we're talking about the difference between the incumbent, which is 96% Google search is bringing all this e-commerce organic revenue, and the new kids on the block. Let's just call it ChatGPT or ChatGPT and its 6 cousins, and we all know what we're talking about.
Yes.
So what are these different mental models? So when I go to Google search and I try and find something, what's happening in my brain? Just that, what we think a lot about is the intent, and there's been a lot of talk about intent. But if you think about it, the intent behind the words, and then the words are going to be used either in Google search or they're going to be used in ChatGPT and its 6 cousins. And so what is the mental model that's going on when I go to do a Google search to buy something?
Yeah, so when you try to use Google search, people tend to use short searches. So 2 or 3 words or 4 words. They hardly do sentences, right? So they're basically searching like would you search in a shopping mall, like trying to like keywords and trying to find those keywords. However, the ChatGPT one is you can have a conversation with it. So so that activates the social elements in the brain. So when you talk to a human being, you're part of the brain that's compute the social interaction activates, but it doesn't activate when you're doing Google search. So because you're using Google search as a tool, not as a conversation with someone. Right? So that would be the two biggest difference.
And there's a part of the world that's learned to have conversations, and then they're so entrenched in, say, having a conversation with ChatGPT that they then end up Googling and they find that they're trying to have a conversation with Google, which is predominantly kind of keyword driven, and you kind of get caught. Oh, I'm not in the environment that I just got used to.
Yeah. Also, some people are not familiar with talking to their digital tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or having a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
They just type a few keywords and that's enough for them. That's a minority of people do tend to have a conversation, but majority of people do not have a conversation with their tools. They just use it and then they leave after they satisfied with the result.
Do you have any insights into the actual audio usage of computers? Because I know, my sister got into it very early. I tried a little bit with Siri. I got frustrated. I dropped it.
Yes.
I guess there was a period of time where audio was going to take over, right? Siri was so amazing that everyone's going to be talking to their computer, and it just didn't. It didn't take off, right?
Yeah,
But
that was
anything
a hype
else?
cycle. That was a example of a hype cycle where series and home what they call home computers type of thing, so you can talk to in your home to turn on the lights and stuff like that. So
Right.
that was a cool thing, but then people stopped using it because it was driven by novelty. So novelty activate dopamine spike in the brain. However, if you don't form habits after that novelty spike, it will naturally die down and people stop using it. Or, as you said, Simon, that if you had like two or three negative experiences with Siri or a chatbot, you would just stop using it. Go, oh, she's stupid. I don't want to deal with it. I'll just type into Google search and that's the end of that. So like having because it's more likely that you have a negative experience when you have a conversation with the robot. The robot might misinterpret your intentions, or you might be giving off the wrong questions, etc. Or maybe your accent is off and the robot didn't catch it, right? So all of those factors um, makes people turn it off eventually and then just stick to what they know best.
Yeah, actually, I mean, if we just talk for a moment about the evolution of ChatGPT, um, they tried search about a year ago. I gave a talk and showed that it just brought up completely bogus websites. This was the very beginning of the Search GPT, the attack on Google.
Yeah.
Russian site. I was trying to buy a presentation clicker. Russian sites, Saudi Arabian sites with no traffic for the last 5 years. It was the most bizarre assembly
Yeah.
of kind of bizarre attempt at anything remotely useful. Um, I did a
Mm.
I did a whole talk showing just all of these failures, and then they did a Bing tie-up late last year. Um, that's curious. Obviously, it's important because they have a close relationship with Microsoft. But Bing's got a 4% market share of the search market, so they weren't exactly going with the leader. And
Yeah.
then it's Search GPT, and then they decided a couple of months ago they decided to release that they're going to build a crawler, which feels like they're going back to 1998 when Google created a crawler. Now that could be
Yeah.
because they're going to go into these new devices. Um, but search has been elusive. They've done a tie-up with Shopify. You and I tested it yesterday, and it was
Yeah.
crazy. It found a couple of pool tubes. The first two listings were actually quite good. I was blown away. Like I'd never
Yeah.
seen ChatGPT actually have any efficacy on its search. But the two listings, the first two are identical, went to the same page, and the
Yeah.
third one was not relevant. And then um, when I went to Google, I got the plethora of stuff related to that product that I was kind of, oh yeah, this is what I really want.
Yeah.
Like Like
Yes,
a
yes,
huge effort for a multi-billion-dollar company has been to just get a search result that's not bogus. So search is obviously a
yes,
lot harder than they thought. Anything in
yes,
e-commerce is incredibly difficult. And this is why they're doing the tie-ups with Shopify to try and actually get the data structures and get access in behind the scenes to
yes.
actually have search that works. So in the past, some services have died off. We talked about Siri. I mean, that's pretty much dead. So what's different about Google search in our lives, and what position does it hold in our brains collectively, having been here for 25 years?
Yes. Yeah, we can go into a little bit of different examples of services that have died, right? So we can talk about BlackBerry versus iPhone. So when iPhone came out, um, it was a revolutionary product, and with no keyboard or any physical elements of it, how and people switched to it within 5 years or so. They switched to the smartphone model away from the BlackBerry, and also streaming services like Netflix became the dominant force in the market, leaving behind the disc-based, DVDs and VCD-based shops and renting and lenting DVDs died off, right? So because they were better products, however, the adoption is not as instant. It is takes some time, a few years to catch up. Right? For Google search, and we can look at what Google search replaced. Right. So before Google search became popular, we had Yahoo search and some other search engines. And
Mm.
the problem with them, they were quite good, but the problem with them is they are very clunky and they have a lot of stuff on it. So there's a lot of different links, news, and there's a lot of different features on it. But with Google search, and this is documented in their biographies in Google designers and Google founders, is Google search is they made it extremely simple. Right? They took away 90% of the features that are already in the dominant like Yahoo search, that they kept it extremely simple. So just one bar and say type in what you want to know. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
Anything on the internet, type it in.
you could say you could say that ChatGPT, with its cognitive agent at the front, is inspired by the Google search bar, right? It's just like a blank screen
Exactly.
prompt. You know,
Yes.
It's Google
Yes.
Search 2.0, right? In fact, Google even invented the
Yeah.
technology behind it. But what I'm getting at is what place does the pathways that are in our brain hold in
Yeah.
terms of our willingness to jump into the new paradigm um, for it to be
Or
critical
unwillingness to
mass?
jump.
Yeah,
Unwillingness to jump. Yeah. So there's something called the energy conservation. So the brain likes to conserve energy at all times,
right,
at every stage of your waking moment. So the way
right,
the brain solved that issue is it create habits, it create familiar patterns of behavior, right? So you have
right.
a morning routine, you have certain routines that your life naturally takes shape. If you go to work, etc.,
I got
you
it.
drive.
I've
Yeah,
got an example. I worked with a guy
please.
at Shell. It was at Shell in New Orleans, and he used to park on the 17th floor of the car park. And he drove me into the car
Yeah,
park one day, and like there were all these
yeah.
floors that were empty, and we're going all the way up to the 17th floor, and we're parking right next to the elevator. And we get out and like, Brian, why are we parking here? Like, why do we have to do this? He's like, well, because on any day I know this park is free. No matter how full it is, I know
Yeah,
this park is free. That's an example of conservation
yes,
of energy. It doesn't have to think. It's a habit, kind of weird, but so that's our energy conservation.
yes, yes. So when it's exactly like your example, the person they know, because the familiarity of that knowledge that that car park is always free, and then they always drive to it, it's actually their brain work faster. Even when they're climbing to the 17th floor to park, their brain is actually work faster than if they park on the first floor, even if the
Let's give
first floor is
let's give
free.
it let's give a test to everyone. If you went to an event last week or last month, the last event you went to, you didn't know how you're going to get there. How? Because I tried this. I went to one of Ken's events last week, and I said to people there, "How did you get here? Did you use ChatGPT?" And
Yeah,
people were like, didn't even answer the question like it was a rhetorical question. It wasn't a rhetorical question. They were like, of course not. What did you use? Google Maps, maybe Apple Maps.
yes,
Um, so
yes,
So when we talk about Google search, Google's got other, I mean, we're deliberately not really talking about Gemini and its whole AI play because all the revenue for all of our brands is of organic, is 98, 99%. The world is still pouring through Google search, AdWords, Google My Business, Google Maps. So, So there's a conservation going on because we've learned how to do something, and 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 this last point, how can Google adapt? The If you listen to Sundar, he talks about it's almost like he's doing this. That someone has to do a massive. I know a guy who merged two banks together. Like it's a massive undertaking. He knows what he's got to move to, but he's also got
yeah,
8.5 billion used searches a day to slowly get there. And that's the way it feels like. We invented the stuff, other people ran away with it. We've got all the commerce, we've got all the revenue, and we're gonna just do it a piece at a time because we can't break anything. Just like we do a site migration for people. We're doing a site migration on our own sites, and we're changing
yeah,
Australia, and then we leave that for a while, and now we're going to go to a .digital domain, and then we're going to go to move everything to the dot. Like it's slow because you don't want to lose anybody, you want to lose any traffic. So I think the adaptation is like the iceberg under the water that we don't really see what's going on there. But you can scream blue murder and say, oh no, forget Google search because it's all going to be ChatGPT and its six cousins. All right.
yeah,
This really is a counter to the earlier session. So, habits, saving energy, simplicity, speed, serotonin. This is what you've just
yes,
been talking about. That we've got these
yes,
habits where it's all about conservation. There is a
yes,
simplicity about it. There's a speed about it. Even it might be a bit wacky, doesn't make sense. I remember my wife didn't
yes.
want to get to a smartphone. She was like, "Oh no, I like my little clamshell piece of crap thing from Vodafone." And serotonin. Tell us about the chemical serotonin and why it's tied into this whole world that we live in with Google
Yeah,
search.
so serotonin it gives it does mood regulation. It gives a feeling of security. It gives a feeling that things are going to be okay, right? So when people try to make their environment secure by forming routines and habits, right? So we talked about saving energy, and simple. They like to simplify the world because the world is complex and has a lot of conflicting, competing information. So they simplify the world and then put them in habits. So when they do that, like using Google search every time you need to search something and ignore all other tools that could be better, is there because the serotonin is driving that action, right? And also, if they have had positive experiences on Google in the past, right, consistently positive experiences, then that reinforces the habit, right? So, and even like Google search became so popular that it became a cultural word. Like Google, it's
Mm.
replaced the word search. So when I say I'm gonna Google something, like that's a word that we made up because Google became the dominant search of all internet searches, and because of
Yeah,
the
and look,
habit formation is very, very
and we
strong.
could. and we could be saying the same thing about some of the marketplaces like Amazon, right? It's still in
Yeah,
this habits line, saving energy, simplicity, speed, serotonin. If it's not here today, I just
yeah,
get used to all this. I just get used to it very quickly.
yeah.
That
People are
coming from
also,
you.
yeah,
Keep
people are
going.
also risk averse, right? They don't want to take risk, especially when they have to make high risk decision making. They stick to the familiar options,
What
right? So
I,
what?
I
Yeah,
think that's that's some of the damage that ChatGPT is doing in search. The efficacy has been appalling, and even with a little bit of efficacy now, the first time I've ever found a good result was literally you and I preparing for this, and I was blown away. And then I was like, oh, actually, it's not that good a result. I just can't believe that it got something right. And but it burns bridges. It's like, how many times do I use Siri when it doesn't give me the right response before I go, it's too risky. I don't want to. I don't want to spend the energy on the newness and have the. It's like the opposite. And then I got disappointment. I've got all my attention when I'm writing a CV and excitement when I can put out a press release or a LinkedIn post, or I'm getting this dopamine of how I live my life differently. And then,
yeah.
is that restaurant open, or what restaurant? I showed you 4 restaurants in Chiswick. 2 are in Barnes, one was in Richmond. I mean, its efficacy
Yeah, that
is
was fun.
terrible for some things. And when that's what you want, it introduces a risk factor, and we go back to our habits that are saving energy. We've got simplicity, speed, and serotonin. Anything else about the dopamine hit of the chat GPT and its 6 cousins, the Geminis, the co-pilots, the
Like when
all its
ChatGPT
complexities?
became a phenomenon on the internet, is driven by young people, like the youth, people, basically students in universities and high schools started using it to cheat on exams, right? That was basically how it started become popular. Uh, Also, the dopamine is higher in younger people, right? They like novelty, but people who have been using like Google search, older people that have been using Google search for decades, the dopamine and newness, they actually might find that risky, right? They don't find that exciting. And so they would like to stick with it. And also dopamine has a drop off. So when you have a novelty response, dopamine spikes very, 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 very high, and then it also drops down very quickly, right? So if you don't capture your audience within that spike moment, you will lose it. And if you don't form the habit of that people keep using the tool, you will just lose them forever because the
Yeah.
novelty is very, very
Okay.
quickly.
I'm just going to go through it to the one more. Yeah. I'm just gonna comment over these so we get through to that final slide. So, um, e-commerce really grew up with Google as well as the other social media platforms, and we're seeing a change. And everything about Web 1.0 and Web 2.0 is kind of embodied in Google search. In essence, the whole agency world and the e-com platform world has all these checks and balances, and Google's got this open system that kind of welcomes any participation. So what's been challenging about the ChatGPT world is that it's closed, and it's only the last 4 weeks that ChatGPT's opened up, documentation, tech specs. Like we are about 4 weeks into a crack into one of the LLMs that is really meaningful for us as organic traffic, revenue generators. That's what we do. We bring traffic in to generate. So
Yeah,
yeah, we've talked a little bit about the older brains. I liked what you said about the youth. It's like there is like a youth grab of knowledge, a thirst for knowledge, and suddenly I don't have to go and study for 3 years, or I don't have to go and work in a firm for 6 years. I can just grab
yeah,
this knowledge. So there is a
yes.
massive shift. So the AI rush is real, but really what keeps our eye on things is that organic revenue, right? Think what I want people here to think about is what proportion of organic revenue is flowing through Google search versus ChatGPT and its 6 cousins. And it's like 98, 99%. No one's got the numbers on it. It's nobody's really talking about the organic revenue that's coming off this traffic. So strategy is all about organic revenue and the language. And this is the final thing I just want to wrap up here. So thank you, Ken. Been amazing to hear you talk. And words drive all our searching and our prompting. It's people using words and buying stuff online. So you've got to really look at the language-led e-commerce revenue strategy that you're running. That's critical. And I think we're at time there. Alexia, hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for the session, guys. I am wondering if you can give us a piece of, I don't know if advice or a tips and tricks for our audience, like anything you would like to be particularly shared at the end of the session.
Well, just that. I don't think brands have scratched the surface of the money that they can make off Google search. I mean, we that's what we set out to do 4 years ago, was to just focus on the money, not the impressions and the clicks. And man, we've barely got out of the gate, and it's not going away. I mean, Ken and I were saying, we think Google search is here for about 5 years, just throwing money at the brands that want to actually pay attention and do the deep work. So I think that's the key thing. It's just focus. Don't get sidetracked. Focus on the money trail out of Google search. And then the second piece is that hedge your bets and have a large language model strategy and be optimizing for that. But don't expect the payback from that.
Yeah,
that's more just preparing you.
And don't underestimate the status quo bias. People like to stay in the status quo and familiarity than the average people, right, who are not early adopters. So you have to be very careful, because the average people are the people that spend the most money on e-commerce, right? So you got to be careful about.
We are the ones spending the most money on e-commerce, right? All right, yes. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Tell us where we can find you. I would say LinkedIn, but
my QR code's there. It's my contact book. So let's just scan the QR code or hit me up.
Yeah, my website is called pelconsulting.org. So that's my business, and you'll see me there. My contact information. Okay.
All right, perfect. Thank you, guys.